So what we do is at the end of the 3-year cycle, we provide a report to people in investments or our leadership, talking about so what do we do in that. So these are some of the larger projects that we've worked on, and I'm not going to try to read this to you, but I think what's important is, number one, thank goodness the Timken Company's here, because they count to almost $400 billion of investment. And you know, in today's world, at least the life I live, there's no certain thing anymore. Is you can't expect a company's going to remain here forever, because the minute you start feeling that way, the minute they begin to say, are we of value here anymore? And so the commitment of the Timken Company to look out into the future, and if you listen to a presentation that they've done a couple of times this year about how they've changed the whole focus of the company, it's pretty impressive. And I can tell you, they're a company looking at the future, not the past. And so, as our chief manufacturing company here, you know, all you have to do is visit their campus, look at the age of their workers today, which is about 32 years old, and you see a bright future there, a very aggressive future. So, you know, I think we begin saying, thank goodness the Timken Company's here, and thank goodness they're a major investor in the development board, and they serve on our leadership, and they're just a great company to have here. So I want to start there. Some of the other things I think of interest are that when you look at this number, 580 million, the previous campaign, I forget the exact total, was about 335 million. So you can see the impact of their investment. But this is a record amount of capital investment in Stark County that since I've been on the board as president for 25 years, or 23 years. And so, you know, I think, as we all know, when we look at the economy right now, we look at signs of a recovery. Number one is certainly a jobless recovery, and that's tragic, but its reality is businesses are sitting on a lot of cash. They're beginning to make decisions to grow, but the fact of the matter is most of it is not hiring new people, and I'll get to that later. So there's a strategy we're going to use to say, well, how do we fill in with new jobs in that? It's going to talk about entrepreneurship. The other thing, though, is that, you know, I think that from our perspective, over the last 6 months, we've really seen a fairly dramatic slowdown the last 3 or 4 months, and I call it the pre-election jitters. You know, if you talk to most of the businesses, it's not that they're not prepared to grow, it's not that they don't have cash to grow, it's the uncertainty of where's the economy going, from everything from healthcare, cost and climate, to taxing issues, to just uncertainty about what's happening in Europe. Europe's in a major flu right now. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and so we've just noticed that inquiries and the people we're working with, that things have kind of ratcheted down the last couple of months. I expect they're going to continue like that probably through the election, and maybe beginning November, December, we start seeing investment plans in January, businesses begin to expand. Not to say we're not working, but it's just the volume isn't there. And so if you hear people say the economy's great, I don't know that. I talked to T. Neal about the same thing in the board meeting last week. They're saying the same thing. So if somebody's overly optimistic, I'm not sure they are living in the real world today. So, you know, it's just what it is. Some of the things that we continue to show a lot of excitement for continues to be fuel cell development. You know, we were very fortunate years ago to have Rolls-Royce come in and basically buy out a small alliance company called Sofco and begin to not only go from prototyping to research, but begin to put in some automated manufacturing, begin to look at potentially manufacturing 1 megawatt fuel cell here. What people didn't know, and we had the privilege of knowing in advance, was that to stage the next growth of Rolls-Royce, they needed some outside investment to come in and basically provide them the capital to move forward in their commercialization efforts, which is a sign they're getting closer to that. And so Rolls-Royce has gone through a major joint venture. It took about a year to put together, both with a Korean company called LG. So I see LG's appliances all over the TV and that. They're a major, broad manufacturer with heavily into electronics and appliances, things like that. But so LG is now the principal owner of the joint venture. 51%. Rolls-Royce is a minority partner, 49. They certainly 49 is a big stake in the company. The exciting part is that as we work with LG officials now, that they're closer and closer towards launching their commercial product, which I'm not going to try to guess when they're there, but certainly probably sometime in the next 2 years.
What is a fuel cell?
It's really just, It's an energy source. If you think about electric power, that we all know, it's generated power generally coming through a central power station at a utility plant. And the problem with utilities in general is they're very expensive to capitalize. Take a long time to provide the capital and to build these facilities. Very expensive capital. And secondly is they tie into a grid of electric companies around the country, which the grid is all the time beginning to show signs of fatigue and wear. So the utility companies, who would be the principal customers of fuel cells, are beginning to look at what they call distributed power. So instead of having all this central generation, you now buy a commercial fuel cell. Rolls-Royce is pretty standard, 1 megawatt. It's, if you think about a truck trailer, that's about the size of it.
Yeah, how big would this be? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you put it next to a Kmart, it would power a Kmart. If you put it in a residential subdivision, it'd do about 800 homes. And so the fact of the matter is the new model is, and they're a lot less capital intensive and costly than paying for, you know, I don't remember what a power plant costs today, but you're having to defer all that expense until it goes online and you try to recapture money. It's very expensive business in that. So Rolls-Royce sees the market as many others.
What's the energy source for it?
They produce the energy
variety?
within. They produce. It's a combination of gas and hydrogen. They produce it within the trailer.
Okay.
So if you'd like, I'm sure we won't be able to give it a tour for anybody to go out to Rolls-Royce and now LG and see what's going on. But it's just a new way to generate power that is less costly and like I said, doesn't use central power plants. It puts them where the users are needing that. So we're very lucky because LG now is continuing to progress, close to commercialization. Probably in the next stage we'll look at what they would call beginning manufacturing, small scale stuff. Long run, our goal is they get to large volume manufacturing. Could they one day be, I'm just throwing out a number, 400, 500, 600 jobs to start counting, all geared to manufacturing, good wages and that, you know, high skills. So we continue to support LG now in terms of their efforts. It means going after federal and state grants, lobbying state officials, bringing people on the tour and that. They're just a great company in that, and LG will be just exactly the same. So a little update on Utica Shale. I understand John Keiss touched on it from a hotel perspective yesterday, but let me tell you our perspective. So it is, I think you recall, about almost 2 years ago, Chesapeake Energy came in to visit Stark Development Board. They were going out, meeting a lot of groups in the community, kind of establish themselves. And they asked if I could bring some of our board members together to basically listen to a presentation about them and what they're planning on doing. We had about an hour-and-a-half meeting. I had 3 or 4 of the board members in there. And at the end of the conversation, Chesapeake basically said, you know, will you support what we're doing? And our response was, well, we like what you're saying, but we don't understand the industry. And so that resulted in us putting together, which is very unusual for us, a blue ribbon committee, pro and con on the subject. 2 doctors, former health commissioner, Bill Biddle from former dean of Kent State, very smart individual. Roger McCain was from, at the time, Rolls-Royce. Roger was a petroleum engineer. We brought in Timothy's head of quality to talk about the process of producing and that. Great committee, worked about 8 months, wrote a position paper, had a process where we were bringing experts, mostly by teleconference, but some in, a lot of meetings with ODNR officials. They came in 3 times. We had Chesapeake come in and make their case to that. Once we heard all the information, and we kept flooding the materials from the internet, we showed them Gasland, the whole thing. We watched this committee come together and wrestle with, some people had experience from the old days in Pennsylvania and the East Coast, but ultimately, one of the things we said to the committee was that this paper shouldn't be about the economics of shale. Number one, because having read all the material, much of the material on the economics in Pennsylvania with Marcellus shale, here in more Utica, the economic benefits were just so clear that it wasn't worth trying to elaborate. And it's the thing about, and can you really take the results in Pennsylvania and forecast them on how it will be accurate? So we said, it will be significant if it occurs. It has to prove itself. But at the time, Ed Roth was our chairman. The real issue we were trying to deal with was safety and regulation. Can you do this and not make a mess of this? And And so that was the focus of the committee in that, and that's why we had ODNR in 3 times. You know, the position paper's on our website. If you want a copy, I'll email it to you. But basically, the response of the committee was providing about 11 recommendations, fairly really thoughtful recommendations, that said, if this is so good, there's ways to improve this in the state. And we recognized that actually Ohio was recognized. Probably the most important thing was by a group called Stronger, which is a combination of the federal government, outside law, interest law, environmental groups, private business, and the industry, on looking at how Ohio's regulating Ohio's oil shale. And actually the Stronger Commission has numerous times said Ohio's one of the leaders. This is before they just changed the regulations in regulating shale activity, which is a good sign. Since then, they've changed the regulations, and our report, when it was completed by the committee, adopted by the board, was actually sent to the governor, sent to the ODNR, Department of Natural Resources, sent to our state legislators. I think we sent each of you a copy, if I recall. And the message was, you cannot ever take for granted there could be an accident, because that's just life. But the fact of the matter is that if you have systems in place to try to mitigate what happens when there's an accident, if there is a problem, you investigate and determine what the weakness was, and you have to build past the weakness to constantly improve, like a manufacturing company would. You get through, and our conclusion was that we felt like that all the concern about that we felt was a safe thing to do in Stark County. And it reflected the fact that over like 4 years we drove 4,000 wells in Stark County, and there had been less than 1% incident a year, even though it was vertical. If you look at the experience in Texas and North Dakota and others in that, it's a very unlikely event. Why we were actually doing the study, they had a spill in Brecken, Pennsylvania, and went down. So we were on the phone, Bob Patterson was on the phone with Pennsylvania health officials talking about what's the result of the damage, it's negligible, they did a fish kill test, not a fish bite, cattle were injured in that. So the bottom line is, we went through a study, we made some recommendations. We think a couple of our suggestions were actually incorporated in the state policy changes, which was, to my knowledge, we had done the only paper on the shale in the state. Since then, a lot of groups have really done a lot of great work. We haven't really gotten more into it. We did what we wanted to do. But the interesting thing about it is that, so then you get to, so what are we doing about it? And what's interesting to me is the 3 facets of how to take oil shale and try to help your economy. Number one is that we believe the mission of the Chambers of Commerce, and the CAM Chamber is the leader in this, but the other chambers are trying to do this, is to try to connect their members to the business as best they can, to make sure they're aware of it, the opportunities and that. Because with a staff of 5 professionals, we are not equipped to go out and try to convince everybody to be able to do that business. We think that's the role of the chambers. They're doing a good job of it, to support what they're doing. It's more of the business attraction model. We're looking at 2 different areas. Number one is, if you look at the period of time this will take place, in our view it's probably 30, 40 years. We've been working with the state on looking at where the sources of the equipment suppliers are, in-state and out-of-state, and saying if there are parts that are made down south or in Houston or that, why aren't we trying to contact those companies and say, look at the market's beginning to grow here, why don't you reposition your manufacturing and bring those kind of jobs and that business here? That's the number one goal we have. The second goal, which can be done in a lot of ways, is trying to build a sustainable customer base for, in particular, low-cost natural gas. And the point there is that everything from CNG stations for gasoline or converting gas to CNG to, in our view, it's what are the kinds of industries that are going to need, that could use low-cost natural gas as a key reason why they want to locate here. Begin working with the state to target those companies to say, look at Ohio and we believe they're going to look at our area if they do that. So,
by the way, do you, just because natural gas is located here, because of the shale industry producing it, is it any cheaper to buy it here than it would be to buy it in California? Because it's a commodity, isn't it?
It's a commodity, but if you reduce the transportation costs and logistics, it makes sense to do it here. So yeah, it's a commodity, but it wouldn't be the single reason it comes.
Is there a transportation cost associated with the commodity or not? I mean, if I buy cubic foot of, MCF of gas in
Yeah,
California
Tom, I
versus
don't know
yours
how,
at the
I don't know how they
same
price
price.
it now, but
I mean,
I have a feeling they're
sure.
really very, I don't know how they buy it right now. It's an industry we're gonna grow, but, we think it could be an asset.
Oh, yeah, no,
And so I
seems
think,
like it should be, but
but it's a good question.
commodity.
We, the only other thing regarding you to the shale is we did work closely with Stark State, the can chamber, to encourage sharing to try and, to get $2 million of funding for a downtown building dedicated to shale. So, there's a lot of people doing different things to try and say, let's make sure companies come here, and that's certainly been one of them. So these are, I won't try to read it. So these are the kind of things we did in our last 3 years. What I thought I'd do is shift more to, my notes, to some things that we think are on the horizon, things that since that time we're still working